Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Many of you I know, and you know me, so it is double the pleasure and double the fun. As Dr. Evans has said, I am a Panther through and through, bachelor's, master's, staff side, instructor side. I want to give a shout out to my students. HP 9 o'clock, represent. I love them and they love me. Dr. Jenkins. I come to you this morning so we could, just talk a little bit. And I want to give a shout out to Dr. Evans to putting me here. She didn't ask, she assigned. And I'm honored by that because she didn't have to. She wanted to, and she believes in my work and my research. So I want to give a shout out to the Florida girl. Ethiopia, my little daughter. Why hast thou lingered and loitered in the sun? See thy tall sisters, pale and blue of eye. See thy strong brothers, shrewd and slippery haired. See what they have done. Behold their gardens and their magic, their halls and wonder wheels. Behold their gold, their gold, their gold. Flowers, O Mother Earth, I bring flowers and the echo of a song. Mother, sweet mother, in these great and misty years, I have seen sights, I have heard voices. Stories and songs are quick within me. If I have loitered, sun-kissed, forgive me, mother. Chide me not bitterly, I too have lived. The moon. Dr. William Edward Burkhart Dubois' prescient conceptualization of the Black American's dual identity permeates his work, from his prose to his sociological studies. In the poem authored by the moon, but it's alleged to be Dubois, found at the end of the compilation, A Select Bibliography of the Negro American, Mother is asking Ethiopia why she has lingered and loitered in the sun. Mother chides Ethiopia that her tall sisters are pale and blue of eye, and her brothers are strong, shrewd, and slippery-haired. Ethiopia is commanded to behold their gardens, their magic, their wonder, to behold their gold. Ethiopia has lingered in the sun, fooling around. It's suggested that she's been playing when she should have been working, and she's gotten darker to boot. Although sun-kissed could just be a reference to the race, Ethiopia kind of handled that. So sun-kissed, I'm guessing, means she kind of browned up a little bit. Her sisters are tall and blue-eyed, her brothers have slippery hair, but the poem ends with Ethiopia pleading with Mother to recognize that she too has seen sights. She's heard voices. She's lived. It's within her. Ethiopia knows things. She's just not yet as strong or as smart. And she asks that if she has in fact lingered, that she not be judged harshly because she too has lived. This poem is a literary complement to Du Bois' sociological case studies, as well as a glimpse into his complex experiences as a Northern, Black, American, formerly internationally educated man who moved south to teach at a segregated university. Du Bois' essays and studies focus on the limitations that a racially unjust America has placed upon, to use the parlance of the time period, her darker brothers and sisters. Within a 15-year period, in addition to his case studies, he authored an anthropological essay, edited a comprehensive bibliography on the American Negro, conducted an in-depth study that examined the life of the 19th century Negro in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This comprehensive study accumulates data on Negro marriage, ownership, entrepreneurial endeavors, health, community, mortality rates, and education. In his analyses, Du Bois held America accountable, but he was also equally intent upon impressing upon Black Americans their need to take responsibilities for their shortcomings, including cultural, economic, and moral underdevelopment. We're going to circle back to that in the discussion. Du Bois is writing from the vantage point of a Negro man who was immersed and educated in an elite Eurocentric environment. Like that word, environment? He believed in the cultural values of that education. He believed in it. He didn't just learn it. He believed in it. And of the civilizing component, for my class, you know there are a couple of words you're not allowed to say, and what is one of them? Civilized. That's a loaded code word, but again, we're going to circle back to that in the discussion. He believed in the civilizing component, even as he contradicts the racially biased so-called scientific conclusions of the Negro's limitations. In his essay, Races of Men, contained within Select Discussions of Race Problems, Du Bois debunks the ideas of an ideal race of men descending from the lofty Himalayas to produce the superior Aryan specimen. He also disputes the fictitious eugenics-based myth that the shape of the head and the weight of the brain prove European superiority or African superiority. Because if we were going by the shape of head, I would be a Rhodes Scholar. In the Philadelphia Negro, Du Bois connects scientific data, well, maybe I still could be, coulda, shoulda, woulda, on the Negro to improvements in economic development, ownership, better morals, all-important hygiene. Du Bois was developing sort of a cult of true blackhood. Two words that appear throughout his early studies are ignorant and peculiar. Du Bois uses the phrase ignorant to emphasize the high rate of illiteracy among African Americans, as well as to cover what Du Bois felt was a cultural void, and that was very important to him. In study of the Negro problem, Du Bois lists three particular Negro problems. Number one, Negroes do not share in the full national life, because as a mass they have not sufficiently reached a high grade of culture. He lists that as the number one issue. Number two, another alum just walked in. They do not share the full national life because American people have a full conviction that the Negro should not be admitted into American life or the group life of the nation. And number three, the problem arising from the backward development of the Negroes, that the mass of this race does not reach the social standards of the nation due to economic conditions, mental training, and social efficiency. So within this context, he is blaming America, but he is blaming the Negro too. And he considers the Negro as developmentally backward and socially inefficient. But he begins to outlay a plan, and we'll rehash that in these esteemed scholars that I'm in the company, and I'm just blown away that I'm actually up here and not in the back row with snacks. One prophetic that Du Bois makes is that freedmen, and this is so important, and in fact on Monday we're going to talk about this instead of what I had planned. One prophetic statement that he makes is that freedmen always start life under an economic disadvantage with which generations, perhaps centuries, cannot overcome. Now he makes this statement at the end of the 19th century, and it's ringing true in the 21st century. He said generations, if not centuries. Mm-hmm. As the philosopher Biggie Smalls would say, true that. He uses the word peculiar to convey his frustration, or as the kids say, he feels some kind of way about, even as the American black works to overcome oppression in their meager beginnings as freedmen in this country, the omnipresent obstacle of binding oppression of American racism inhibits the people. That even as they become educated, as they become entrepreneurs, as they become healthier, as they have stronger mortality rates, they are still bound by oppression. His studies are scientific responses and approaches to developing the Negro, improving the Negro, educating the Negro, and empowering the Negro. So he has the weight of the Negro world on his shoulders. From the study of Negro problems, published in 1898, to The Philadelphia Negro, published in 1899, A Select Bibliography, 1905, which was composed during the 10th Annual Conference for the Study of Negro Problems here at Atlanta University, to the Select Discussion of Race Problems in 1915, Du Bois' learned, isolated, intellectual, hothouse flower environment, upbringing, and education, at least until he arrived at Atlanta University, and then day was night, sort of undergirded the ideology that the Negro's plight could be incrementally improved with the data accrued from his scientific studies. While he wrote about not having really encountered racism, or better yet, Southern racism, that's always my favorite. There's racism, and then there's Southern racism. That's my favorite. That's like being a little bit pregnant. I counter that he encountered racism as a child, and he experienced it at Harvard. In Strivings of the Negro People, which isn't on your chart, but I just wanted to bring this in a little bit, real quick, I'm not going to violate. In Strivings of the Negro People, published in the Atlantic Monthly in 1897, which goes on to become our spiritual strivings in the souls of black folk, Du Bois offers a glimpse into growing up in Great Barrington. That's always treated as some idyllic utopia where there were 50 black people, and because there were only 50, all the 4,950 loved those 50 black people. And it was rosy and utopian, and he was loved and his mother was loved. But he writes in Strivings of the Negro People that one day he realized that he was different after being rejected by a classmate. And I guess it goes without saying that this classmate was a girl with blonde hair. And for some reason, at that episode, he connected the fact that she didn't reject him because maybe he wasn't handsome or funny or witty, but because specifically of his race. And he writes, "For the world that I longed for and all of its dazzling opportunities were theirs, not mine. But they should not keep these prizes." And see, you see a little bit of that rebel radical, because he says, but they should not keep these prizes. I would wrest some, if not all of them, from them. He wonders why God made him an outcast. Now, that's a big leap from the little girl doesn't want to talk to me to why am I an outcast? In his essay, he introduces the idea that the Negro is the seventh son after the Egyptian, the Indian, the Greek, the Roman, the Teuton, and the Mongolian. It is a peculiar consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks at you with contempt and with pity. He does not wish the African to be lost, nor does he wish to Africanize America. This concept, which starts here, begins to reoccur and get developed throughout his studies. In research and writing, he is firm, strong, and clear that racism is a deterrent and an impediment. But at the same time, he's a fierce advocate of African Americans having racial pride in their African identity. But then he alludes to Africa lagging in civilization and development, while exhorting American blacks to address the fact that racism is half the problem, but the other half of the problem is the Negro's comfort with being underdeveloped. The people themselves need to develop cultural acumen, a literacy rate, and economic development. In several places in the scholarship, backward development is actually listed as being the anchor which keeps the Negro from moving forward. In another, he dismisses Negro colleges as schools that do little more than teach literacy and teach literacy and then train teachers. His wish was that the Negro College, which had been in existence for only 30 years at the time of this essay, were as intellectually sound and established as the great colleges of the East, which had been in existence for 200 years. With that being said, the Du Bois discourse can be broken up and studied by time period, by ideology, by study, by subject, and it will reflect a brilliant race man, a sociological pioneer, a progressive, a nationalist, and with iconoclastic tendencies. A nationalistic individual who advocated a reconnection with African roots, with pride in being a Negro, and a firm desire to uplift the race through culture, education, and economic empowerment. In my course, I teach that there is no monolithic Black experience, no monolithic Black leader, absolute scholarship, or chronicle of said Negro experience. Dubois, in all of his genius personified, reflected the intricate internal conflict of a scholar whose life experiences are vastly different from the population that he seeks to empower, in that he seeks to uplift the race even as he critically assesses their shortcomings through a Eurocentric lens. He eventually very publicly clashed with other leaders such as Marcus Garvey and Booker T. Washington about their methodologies, but they sought the same goals: economic development and autonomy. In closing, in my class, we read Booker T. Washington's speech, you know the one, and we read Du Bois's response. And then I take a poll to see who agrees with whom. The overwhelming majority of the class consistently agrees with Du Bois at the outset, and they critically, in all of their freshman, sometimes sophomore glory, trash Booker T. Washington. And then I ask who's a first-generation college student. I ask whose parents are blue-collar. And sometimes in this economy, I ask whose parents are no-collar. I then ask them to take a look at their families and then read the material again, and then we reconvene. More often than not, when we reconvene, most draw the conclusion that their parents reflect Washington's reality, but they themselves are Du Bois's dream. I just wanted to close with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shout out to David Harrison, my husband.
All right.
Wave your hand, David. All right.
Dean Mill.